Next. And you will also see a set of classifications under the content code that includes U, PG-14, PG-18, 18 and above. This is to enable classifications as well for a particular program. For the purposes of Malaysia, you know that we have our Film Censorship Board, or Lembaga Penapisan Film, and they also produce a set of classifications. This is voluntary, theirs are mandatory. Simple as that. And the LPF, or the Film Censorship Board, also has powers over our cinema content. Whereas what we do at the CMCF and the MCMC are actually on content which is electronically disseminated via networks. So that's the difference. If at any point in time where our cinemas would be streaming the movies, just like in certain other jurisdictions, then it will also fall under the CMA in that sense. So there is a differentiation. Okay? So the classifications that we have still apply, albeit on a voluntary basis. Like I said, whereas for those issued by the LPF, which is U, P13 and 18, is required for stations to actually follow. Scheduling wise, as required for under the content code, is that programs for a mature audience must only be transmitted after 10 p.m. And that is the only requirement in a sense. Alright? But then how does that apply to Astro? Because you have the programs on a repeat cycle. So essentially, what we have seen is that the way that it is censored, whilst the programs are also classified. So if you have a look-see at a movie on HBO, for example, with an 18 rating at night, the previous night, you see it again this afternoon, also still rated 18, but the measure of censorship for the afternoon broadcast is much more higher. Alright? So that is the difference that they have, and they do have, and that is also the reason why Astro is at the current moment in a way exempted, because the requirements for the content code are for free-to-air TV. Definitely they excludes radio operators, because essentially there's no radio program that is classified. Basically all radio program must be a U-rated level. It must be universal for everybody to listen. Okay? Next. And then you have the internet guidelines as well, or the specific online guidelines. So here, what we have under these guidelines is actually quite technical in a sense, but these are the three main areas which is very much important. One is that we replicate what's stated under section 3 sub 3 of the CMA 1998 that states that nothing in this act shall be construed as permitting the censorship of the internet. So in Malaysia, internet is definitely not censored, and it is still part of the MSC's Bill of Guarantees. Nevertheless, the MCMC does have the powers to actually block websites if need be, if it transgresses any of the requirements of our local laws. And we also have what is outlined in the content code as what is called as an innocent carrier, or in BM is called pembawa tidak bersalah. Essentially, this is where you actually providing a pipeline or a platform whereupon the content was not created by you. You had no knowledge of the content, but it appears there. You didn't put it, somebody else did. If that is the case, then you have the responsibility to remove the content within a stipulated time. For if not, you yourself will be liable for that bad content. So during the point that you were not knowingly carrying such content, you are deemed to be an innocent carrier. And further to that, we already see that whatever that is illegal offline is also essentially illegal online. So any defamatory statements which may be in physical form and then digitized, whilst you destroy the physical form, the act of it is still illegal. And if it transgresses any of our acts of parliament, then you will be liable under those requirements of the Act. Okay. So I'm not going to touch so much on part 6 and 7, but we do see that in regards to the benefits of media literacy, one of it that we feel is that it inculcates values. Using content or creating content very much has relation to values. And in this sense, values that we're talking about, amongst others, is actually a respect to privacy. It is either your own privacy in terms of whether you want to consume anything and your privacy not to share, in terms of how you read or analyze a particular set of content, or even to respect someone else's privacy, where you don't share content which is objectionable. Only through media literacy will you then be able to assess and contemplate whether the content is something that should be shared or not. So that, among others, lies within the benefits of media literacy. And it also develops sensitivities. More so for Malaysia, where we are multicultural, multi-language, multi-ethnicity, multi-religious and whatnot. So you do have to take a look and think about your neighbor next door in terms of what is it that you want to involve yourself with in terms of content. So you can develop such sensitivities when you actually understand the kind of content that you're looking at or assess. And other areas of honesty as well as ethical rules, respect for diversity, sorry there's a typo there, respect for diversity, cultural sensitivity, and you can also develop an appreciation for a scientific approach in terms of what you do when you get involved in media creation or media access and whatnot. So these are all intrinsic values that comes in by having a literate mind in terms of how you handle media. And other than that, next, also a development of certain fundamental skills where you can actually then sharpen your own observation skills, probably even increase your research capabilities, and in assessment and analytical thinking, it becomes more creative and critical. You develop strengths in terms of how you want to communicate, either through receiving communication or redistributing communication. And then you are also involved with ICT in a sense, because this media, the media that you're accessing essentially right now in this day and age requires a lot of ICT know-how. And it allows for you to take initiative in terms of what is it that you actually want to do with a set of content. Either the ones that you create, where you want to make a living out of it, then you take the initiative to actually promote it, or if you find that it is objectionable, taking the initiative to actually curb it. It goes both ways. And in essence, all this does allocate you an element of participation in the social and cultural fabric of society. So all in, there's a lot to say about the good things about media literacy in essence. And we can't have a code or any kind of regulatory document without the capability of enforcing it. And for the CMCS purposes, we have our Complaints Bureau. And our Complaints Bureau chairman is actually a different chairman from the CMCF itself. Two different people. And the Complaints Bureau is also independent from the council. They do talk when it requires to be so, but other than that, in dealing with cases, it is independent. However, the Complaints Bureau chairman, being either a retired judge or senior judicial officer, is not alone. He's helped by one representative from one of the categories of members that we have. So the decision that is made by our Complaints Bureau is not singular and it's not in a silo. It is actually, in essence, an industry decision. So you have members from the advertising fraternity, so on and so forth, including the civic groups. And the civic groups are populated by either NGOs or Institute of Higher Learning. And that gives us a semblance of what is out there from the perspective of the layperson, in addition to what the industry members are giving. Okay? So, by consensus and only through majority or unanimous decision can a complaints order or decision be issued out. Alright? Okay, next. So for the purposes of our Complaints Bureau, it considers and deals with complaints relating to content as provided for in the code, to investigate any content considered to be in breach without there necessarily having been a complaint, to rule on any dispute arising between members of the forum and between a member and non-member, and to interpret provisions of the code when the need arises or when a request is made. So these are among the main tasks that we have under the Complaints Bureau, and it is at the current moment mostly voluntary, and there's no charge also for our services. Next. The complaints that we receive from are from various sources, one being from members of the public, the other being from industry members, and we also do receive complaints from other government agencies or other related stakeholders. When we receive a complaint from a member of the public, it is something that we take up immediately and deal with it. And we will make the necessary investigation on the platforms that they had complained about. But when it comes from an industry-related complaint, we normally will have these both parties, or however various parties that are related to the complaint, to try and talk to each other first. Try to mediate themselves if possible. If the issue is not that bad, they could actually just decide themselves and basically eliminate any requirement for a complaint at all. But if that does not happen, if discussions at their level fails, then they can actually submit a proper complaint to us for us to take into account what are the issues relating to their complaint. But even then, we still begin with some mediation process. Only if after that it still cannot proceed, then we will take it to a higher level where we look into the complaint as if we're like a small court or tribunal or what have you. Okay. Next. And the penalties and sanctions that we have under the code, where there is a breach, then we will issue a written, then we can either issue a written reprimand, and if it's a serious breach as well, we can impose a fine not exceeding 50,000 ringgit. And we can also require the removal of the content or to cease the offending act. Okay, so these are the penalties and sanctions that we have. Any questions so far? Yep. Yes, it's available online. Go ahead to our website, which is cmcf.my, and you can download it from there. Go through our various tabs as well and look at our other documentation that we have. I just hasten to add that as well, that through the advertisement guidelines that we have, if you go through it, you will also find, among others, products which cannot be advertised, as an example. So one of it is actually slimming products, which is either used by ingestion or by topical usage. So whilst that is the requirement of the code, industry development in terms of what we have seen recently is that there's a lot of people wanting to actually advertise this slim product, so to speak. But the requirements of the code prohibits it if the product is to be taken orally or by topical. So we issued a guidelines on it as well. So the guidelines basically tells practitioners or even anybody in terms of what kind of products that's related to the slimming industry that could possibly be advertised and in what manner. So we do that development work as well. So it is not just the code that we have, but probably we also have that guidelines and maybe some other things that you might find interesting. Any other questions? Yeah.
How many complaints do you get from the public?
On average of a given year, I think for the past 2 to 3 years we get about 400 to 500 complaints a year, and majority, about 80 to 90%, is actually from the public. So it ranges from areas of advertising content, broadcasting content, mobile content, as well as internet content. Most of which on internet content nowadays is populated by social media issues. So in terms of social media issues as well, we tell them to self-regulate, because that's the fastest way to actually deal with it as well.
And what are the main issues which result in complaints?
Sorry, say again?
What are the main issues which are complaints?
Okay, so if you're looking at most of the broadcasting content that we receive in terms of complaints, it will either be on a program or advertisements. And we have, I think, more on advertisements. We're looking at advertisements as a measure of companies trying to sell their products. So they'll be using certain kinds of words, languages, and what have you, and sometimes it can be a bit either misleading or misunderstood. So we have to deal with this kind of content. First and foremost, obviously, we will investigate what it's all about. We will look at whether they actually conform to certain primary regulations or laws that needed for that advertisement to go online or to be broadcasted, and then we will look at the content. So we will look at it in terms of testing it, like I mentioned earlier, against the requirements of the content code. And if there is a breach, and obviously there is grounds for penalty. But it can be as simple as just a one-liner or just one word that's been misunderstood. Or it can also be a disclaimer that was put on a particular app which was false. You know? So that among others could be an issue. I'll show you an example.
Dia bagai permaisuri yang sempurna, jelas yakin dirinya. Dia yang menawan hati semua. Dia mendapat ceria.
Cuba menyaksikan kulit mereka lebih cerah dengan Fair and Lovely Fairness Filter. Jadikan kecerahan kulit milik anda.
A skin whitening cream or a skin whitening facial wash, right? And basically there's nothing really that can be said to be wrong about the app. There's nothing obscene, there's nothing primarily indecent or what have you. But the complaint that came in for this was actually a peer-to-peer complaint. L'Oreal actually made an issue about the disclaimer. They said that the disclaimer was false, or rather was inaccurate, based on the market research that they have. And we actually dealt with this case with both of them, and the product owner for Fair and Lovely is Unilever, whom were not a member of the CMCF at the time. L'Oreal was an indirect member to the Malaysia Advertisers Association. But it was fine because we can actually deal with cases of the nature. So in relation to this, one of the requirements under the advertising guidelines is that if you make claims, you must have the necessary documentation to back up your claim. It's as simple as that. All right? And in this regard, they are actually making a claim where they say that they're the number one fairness cream based on the volume of sales in Peninsular Malaysia. And L'Oreal says that no, that's not true. The market research that we have says that that is not true. What they required from Unilever was just to remove that and you can go on. That was a requirement from L'Oreal, that Unilever can just remove that and go on. But Unilever said no, they stand by what they had put up within the advertisement. So due to the fact that the discussions failed, the case came to us and we dealt with it in the whole form. And when we looked at the documentation from both parties, it revealed that Unilever was actually in error. This disclaimer was not true. And due to that, among others, the requirements of the content code is that any advertisement must not be misleading, must be truth, honest, and must not be misleading. And due to that breach, they were fined 10,000 ringgit for this, just for that simple one line. And about a week later, Unilever then joined the CMCF. So we had a new member out of their indiscretion of this act. So it can be as little as that. Right? So this is a statement of fact which was inaccurate, but there are other types of complaints that we deal with on other different various matters. Okay. Yeah.
So what happens to them if they do not pay the fine?
Well, there are various things that we can look at. But first and foremost, before we take up any case, we actually get both parties to sit down and to actually tell them that for the CMCF to progress with this case, both parties must subject themselves to the jurisdiction of the Complaints Bureau and the Content Code. And that is under Part 1 of our code as well. Because without that submission to our jurisdiction, we actually don't have any powers to force ourselves on them. But in this regard, that was clear in advance. Alright? So for both parties, in fact, therefore then, submit and therefore agree to actually abide by whatever that is decided for by the code. There have been cases before which at the discussion stage that they say that no, they're not really, they don't want to subject them or follow the content code or follow the Complaints Bureau's jurisdiction. Then we say it's fine. So what we tell the complainant, therefore, is that feel free to take any legal action you wish. And that may cause further damages, where you have legal costs, you have all sorts of other compliance costs, you have time costs, that relates to certain other opportunity costs, and you have the damages that you have to pay, which may be, God knows, hundreds of thousands, millions, or what, we don't know. That's for the court to decide. And the case will probably most likely drag on in the courts, rather than this which was settled within a couple of weeks. So we, in a way, provide this service for the industry to actually enhance their capabilities of returning or resuming business. So that's the beauty of self-regulation in the industry setting. Okay? So, yeah.
I should know this by now because UPM is a member of CMCM, but what are the benefits of being a member?
Okay, so first and foremost, overall is actually, for the industry players, is actually, one, definitely is the defense against prosecution. And other than that, is actually they are able to partake in policy development. Because the content code was actually created by the industry members and registered with the government, meaning it is something that the government accepts to be an industry standard. So, of course, you have the other fringes like networking and what have you. But critically, what we feel is that membership to the CMCF allows for everybody to actually have a say. And right now, we are also reviewing the code, and all our members are actually giving input. And they are also part and parcel of working groups, which deals with specific areas of the content code directly. So regardless of whatever part of business you are in the communications and multimedia industry, if you wish to be in that group, of a working group to actually develop this part of the industry, you're more than welcome to do so. It's all voluntary and it's all, like I say, it's inclusive in nature. So this allows for those not in the know to know what's the current development of a particular area of business and to also pitch in. Like I said, like the civic group members, they are able to tell the industry players, no, this is not how communities look at this kind of product, for example. So then we can actually draft out certain amendments, changes, updates, and all that. Right? Yeah.
So what are differences between CMCF and other associations such as the Association of Journalists or Advertising? Because I see that the code of contents is similar, quite similar to the code of ethics.
Well, okay. So we look at it from this point of view. When the ethical considerations between many areas actually do relate to each other. And when we came up with this, the content code was not created out of nothing. We brought in all the current guidelines that were there at the time, existing. So that's why you see similarities between this and maybe like the advertising standards, the advertising standards side of guidelines, which are similar. It is just that the content code only for electronic content. We do not do print. Whereas their guidelines may will cover print as well and all that. But they don't have the power to enforce or penalize. They can only tell their members, you did something wrong, stop it. We can penalize. Because the powers that the enforcement powers given to us is coming from the Communications and Multimedia Act 1998. They may not have that. See, that's the difference. But the principles are the same. So that's the other part.
Who select the member?
Sorry?
Who select the member of the CMCF?
We don't select, it's open. Anybody who wants to become a member, the only requirement is that they have an interest in the communications and multimedia industry, that's all. So meaning is that if they actually do advertisements, for example, but that's as far as they go, they can join. But we do not take individual persons, we take organizations or at the or companies. So that is why under our civic groups you have Institute of Higher Learning like UBM, UUM and whatnot, as well as NGOs, because they are entities.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have to...
Thank you so much.
That was great. There are so many questions, and I'm sure Mr. Mustafa will be happy to have a chat with you one-on-one, even after.